Hello and welcome to this recap and explanation of the OA Season 2, specifically the ending. Now, whilst I say explanation, I don't claim to have the definitive answer that fits everyone's perspective. This is really how I interpreted the story in Season 2. If my explanation is wildly different to yours, I'd love to hear your point of view down in the comment section. So there are so many topics and high strangeness in this season, and the answers to many questions from Season 1 also. So for my first video of Season 2, I thought I'd start with a recap of the main points which leads to my logical explanation of how I saw the ending. So Season 2 recap, let's just start here. So let's start with the house that was built in 1910. So that was built by the engineer and the medium. So the medium sensed that it was a holy site before they built their house. A holy site, and the quote is that it was giving shaman a god's eye view. So the god's eye view is a very crucial description for later on as well. So the house was built and designed around dreams. Of course, on one side of the house it's very benign, but if you enter the house via the tunnel, it then presents a very different architecture. Or you could argue that when you go via the tunnel, you get poisoned by the gas and you hallucinate. But that's food for another theory video. So within this new dimension that we're introduced to in this season, Nina's life is very different because she wasn't on the bus that crashed, so she never had the NDE. But she is psychic, and she did write a book upon dreams. Now this point in the story I found fairly ambiguous, so regards timelines and the motives. So we have Nina and her husband Pierre Ruskin, and they're connected to Hunter, so Hap, prior to anyone else arriving in that dimension. And also, as the strange traveller mentioned to the OA, that people are connected via dimensions as well. So if someone meets someone in one dimension, it's likely that they've probably met them at the same time in another. So we see Hunter, or Hap, he wrote a book as well. So the book seems to be the pivotal point of the puzzle which brought Nina and Pierre Ruskin and Hap all together within this dimension. Also, Pierre Ruskin was treated by Hap in his clinic, so it could be various things. We don't know the exact timeline of things, but it seems to be that is the likely events which brought them all together. So Pierre Ruskin created Curie. So he used Curie to create his companies and get his ideas, which has made himself given him a very successful career. But he also has used Curie to find the house from those details that we find out. So the tunnel, the size of a coffin, the curved double stairs, and a rose-tinted window. We know as well, the previously stated house, that Nina owns it. So the exact sequence of these events is tricky, but let's move on to the app. So the phone app, which was created by Pierce Ruskin. So to send the kids into the house to try and solve the puzzle. That was really the ultimate goal here. But also the subsequent result of the kids entering the house and not being able to solve the puzzle is that the kids were being killed or kind of put into a state or almost like a coma, but they don't seem to be degrading in that water when they're flowering, but they don't seem to be alive either. So when they die, they have that brain seed which comes out, which at that point the kids got handed over to Hap, so that's how he's back involved with the whole process. Okay, so with those points in mind, this is my interpretation of the ending. So at the start of Season 2, we have Michelle. Michelle solves the Ruskin's puzzle on the app and figures out the secret of the house. So we see her reach the rose-tinted window. And what it looks like is she then travels to another dimension. So after that point, we have her in a coma on the ground, and Pierre Ruskin recovers Michelle's body. And at that point, he hires Karim to solve the puzzle, because he has also found that Karim is the fourth part in the dream from Curie. At this point, we don't really know that the dimension that Michelle has gone to is actually Scott's NDE, but that's where Michelle has gone. So then we see Hap and his prisoners enter the dimension that Michelle just left from. So we see them in the clinic. Even though they've escaped that prison, they're just ultimately gone into another prison. So a few days later, after Hap and Homer and Renata and Scott and Rachel kind of get their bearings, we see that OA enter the dimension as well. And that's with the help of the boys and BB-8. Just to point out, the dimension that OA, Hap, Homer, Scott, Renata and Rochelle are currently in is the dimension from Homer's NDE, as we see the OA explain. Which is, once again, another whole video to talk on. But as the story progresses, we see that OA and Karim Washington work together with a mysterious bond. We also learn that Karim was the chosen one by the house. There are so many points I'm glossing over, and I know that, but this is all too much just for one video. Rest assured, I will aim to cover a lot of these points in more depth with some more videos to come. So we see Hap gain the technology to jump to another dimension from that mysterious traveler. And so he doesn't need anyone's help anymore. So he believes that he can now travel to another dimension and also possibly predict the dimension he's going to go in with the flowers spawned from the brain, which obviously has been created by the house. But it's something which has been touched on before, regards the kind of the brain and the flower, the ever forking path within the mind. So really interesting how that was represented in this season. It was quite cool. So Hap begins the movements with those robots. So forcefully, of course, with the OA there and a dying Homer at that point too. So at the same time that Hap is getting those robots to do the movements, we see BB-8 and the boys and Angie mirror them in the old dimension. Because BB-8 is psychic, so she can sense the presence across dimensions and that OA needs their help. So we see OA, Hap, enter that new dimension, and that's followed by Steve. So those characters are certain, they're confirmed to have arrived in that new dimension. Let's just call it Scott's NDE dimension for now. But who else went with them? And that's an interesting question. We know it's all about will to choose your dimension that they wanted to go to. I wouldn't be surprised if most of those characters went to that new dimension. I mean, the circumstance they were in at the old one, I don't know why they'd want to stay. Possibly French would want to stay, but everyone else seemed to have no reason to stay. Okay, so whilst we have the OA and Hap and Steve traveling to that Scott's NDE dimension, we also see Karim at the same time, who has solved the puzzle, and he's made it to the rose-tinted window at the same time as this is all occurring. So the rose-tinted window. Now remember from the first description, it's the God's eye view, which is very apt because it's an eye looking down from above into another dimension. So it's watching these beings, these travelers crossing dimensions, or these angels crossing dimensions. So whilst Karim watches the OA and Hap, he sees Michelle in the background, and he calls to her, calls her to come to the window so she can return to her body that back in the dimension that Karim's in. So we see Michelle travel back to the dimension she came from, so she wakes up from her coma. Then of course we now move on to the dimension with OA, Hap and Steven. And the battle continues ultimately. So now we have possibly Homer won't be the main person that's working with OA. It might be Steve and OA versus Hap for a while. We just don't know what characters are in this new dimension at this point. I mean, that's once again many things to theorize on there. Whilst I've been mentioning that this is Scott's NDE dimension as well, I will say that OA had that NDE in the season, and her NDE showed a glimpse of herself in the same dimension. So she was walking on the aeroplane, some interesting shots on the aeroplane, but the last one was seeing herself with her short hair from this new dimension. So calling it Scott's NDE seems a bit off. Also, in addition to that, as you hear in the final scenes, you see Hap call himself Jason Isaacs, which is his real name. And he has a British accent because he was actually born in England. Also, you hear the OA referred to as Brit, which is also her real name. So now Scott's NDE is actually our real dimension. So a really cool idea how the show was broken out of the fictional into the real world. It's quite cool. A very nice touch. I did think that was quite nice. So that's how I interpreted this season's events. Of course, this was barely even scratching the surface of the content in this season. There's many more points to talk about, But this video has gone on long enough for now, but I really did enjoy this season of the OA. I felt they did a really good job of carrying the story from one season to another and carrying the characters across seasons and also dimensions. I thought that was really great story writing how they did that, kept the old dimensions going with the new one and the characters interacting with each other. I do have some minor gripes with season 2, but for the most part I thought it was very impressive. So if you like this video, please let me know and subscribe for future content around season 2 of the OA. There's many more things to talk about, there's many more crazy theories to come up with, I think. Another couple of rewatches might reveal some more little hints and some snippets of crazy stuff. So I think there's many more talking points to visit on. But for now, I shall leave this video here. So subscribe for future content around this and give me a thumbs up if you liked it. And once again, comment down below would be helpful. But until next time, this is Mesh and I'll see you later.